Nobody warned Mara about the door. She noticed it the moment the landlady handed her the key and turned away without a word. At the top of the staircase, dark wood, tarnished brass, the number 9 sitting slightly crooked as though someone had tried to straighten it once and given up. The landlady said only this before showing Mara to her room on the floor below. The lady upstairs keeps to herself. I would ask you to do the same. Mara was 28 years old and tired and grateful for cheap rent and high ceilings and a room of her own. She unpacked in an afternoon. She made the bed. She stood at the window and watched the October street below and told herself this was the beginning of something better. She boiled the kettle. She looked at her own reflection in the dark kitchen glass and smiled, and the reflection smiled back, and everything was ordinary and fine. That feeling lasted exactly one night. The sound began at 3 in the morning. Not a bang, not something she could name and dismiss. Footsteps from the room directly above her, slow and deliberate, crossing the floor from one end to the other, stopping, then crossing back, then stopping again directly above her bed. The same path over and over with the patience of something that had walked it so many times it no longer needed to think. Mara lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and told herself it was the woman from room 9. People walked at night. The building was old. Sound carried strangely in old buildings. She told herself this every night for 3 months. She told herself this while she lay awake watching the crack in the plaster above her bed widen by degrees, so small she was never quite sure she was seeing it at all. She told herself this while the dust drifted down in the thin light of her lamp and settled on the pillow beside her face. She told herself this while the footsteps crossed and stopped and crossed and stopped and always came to rest in that same spot directly above her head. Then she started to notice other things. She had never once heard those footsteps on the stairs. The staircase in that house was old and punishing. Every step announced itself. You could not breathe on that staircase without the whole house knowing. Mara heard it every morning when she left. She heard it when the men on the ground floor came home at night. She heard every delivery and every visitor and every person who had ever set foot in that building. In 3 months, she never once heard the woman from room 9 use them. She kept notes because she needed to trust her own mind. She sat at her desk in the lamplight and she wrote it all down with the careful handwriting of someone trying to make something real by giving it edges. 3 months. Never on the stairs, never in the kitchen, never heard the shower, never smelled food, never seen her leave. The curtains in her window have not moved. I have checked from the garden. They have not moved once. She went to the landlady. She sat across from her in the small sitting room, with tea going cold between them, and she asked how long the woman upstairs had lived there. The landlady looked at her hands for a moment before she answered. A very long time, she said. Mara asked her name. The landlady said she does not like to be asked. Then she stood up, and that was the end of it. Mara went back to her room. She pressed her ear to her own door and stood in the silence of the landing and listened. Nothing above, nothing on the stairs, just the old house breathing around her, just that faint, sweet, damp smell that never quite went away no matter how long she left the window open. She started watching the building from the street at night. She would stand in the fog below the orange light and look up at the window of room 9, and the curtains were always still, and the amber light behind them never changed, not brighter, not dimmer. The same pale amber glow at midnight that was there at 3 in the morning, that was there when she left for work and there when she came home, as though the light had never been turned off, as though it never needed to be. The last Wednesday of October, Mara woke at 3 in the morning and knew immediately that something was different. The footsteps had not started yet. The room was completely silent and completely dark, and the silence was the wrong kind. The kind that has weight, the kind that presses down. Then she heard it, not footsteps. Something worse than footsteps, a voice from directly above her pillow, low and continuous and deliberate, not words she could make out, a murmuring, as though someone had pressed their face to the floorboards of room 9 and was speaking down through the wood, speaking to the thing below, speaking to her. Mara did not move. She lay with her hands flat at her sides and her eyes wide open. and she listened to that voice for what felt like a very long time. Then it stopped, and in the silence that followed, she heard 3 knocks. Not from above, from below, from beneath her bed, from the empty room on the ground floor that had been unoccupied for weeks. 3 slow, deliberate knocks that moved up through the frame of the bed and into her spine and did not stop echoing in her body for a very long time afterward. 3 knocks, from nothing, from no one. Mara was gone before the sun came up. She packed what she could carry without turning on the light. She moved through her room in the dark by feel alone because she did not want to see the ceiling. She did not want to see what the cracks looked like now. She stepped out onto the landing and she made herself look at the door at the top of the stairs, the thin line of amber light still glowing underneath it, unchanged, patient, waiting. She went down the stairs. Every step screamed under her feet. She crossed the hall. She opened the front door and walked out into the cold, grey, pre-dawn street. And she did not look back at the window of room 9. She moved 4 times in the following year. She never rented above the ground floor again. When I asked her what she thinks about now when she remembers those 3 months, she was quiet for a long time before she answered. She said it took her almost a year to understand what had been wrong, the thing that should have been obvious from the very first night and wasn't, because the mind protects itself from what it cannot bear to know. The footsteps she heard above her every single night for 3 months were too light, far too light for any living body crossing a wooden floor. She had heard them so many times she had stopped questioning them. She had accepted them the way you accept the sounds a house makes, as background, as ordinary. But they were not ordinary. Whatever walked above Mara in room 9 barely touched the floor at all. Sleep well,